I want to get into the international stuff you were discussing earlier. You mentioned some Ukraine stories to me prior. Can you get into that some?
And in fact, I used to say like I think the Ukraine war was kind of the first big hybrid type of conflict where we saw both sides, using, going after infrastructure, right? Shutting down social networks, shutting down. In fact, I think I just read an article about most of the IPs registered in the Ukraine are now, I think it's something like 3/4 of them are sitting outside of the Ukraine. And that's because they've been bought and they're sitting in, DNSs in other locations now. So they've kind of lost control of a lot of that stuff.
I read this morning that Iran's claiming credit on a True Social breach that just happened on a news source out of ours as well. So it's getting to the point with what's changing and evolving in the international war side's finally starting to impact some US stuff more and more.
Yeah, we've seen this before too. So you were absolutely right. That's sort of another lesson from international conflict is one of them is that there's no civilians in a cyber war, right? War is cyber war and cyber war is war. They're the same thing now. Okay. And the reality is civilians, or, if you want to use that sort of concept is gone. The idea of combatants and non-combatants, we're going to, attack an airbase, but we're not going to attack a hospital or a city center or something like that. In a digital, or a sort of like in terms of cybersecurity, there's no such thing, right? So you're right. Iran may not be able to go toe to toe on a battlefield, but, what are they going to do? We're going to see missile strikes into other parts of the Middle East, but we're also going to see things like retaliatory cyber attacks. And in fact, we saw that, I think like 5 years ago when there was sort of a preemptive missile strike fired into Iran. We saw an uptake of cyber activity from, ones that we thought we could attribute back to them. So I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And remember, a lot of those smaller nations like China and Russia less so, they're kind of funding themselves, Iran and North Korea and places like that. It's kind of part of their economy.
You piqued my interest last we talked about some negotiation stories. I get questions a lot from business leaders around if something does occur, what are the steps that take place? We talk a lot about IR. We talk a lot about what recovery really looks like, not just closing the gap, but rebuilding the environment. But rarely do we talk about the negotiation side. Is that a fun side for discussion?
Yeah, it is. So back to like in the book, I talk through that with one case, one executive, and that CEO was interesting because of course their company was a manufacturing firm. This is I'm not in any way sort of denigrating them, but the reality is a lot of times when you're a mom and pop or a sole proprietor type of business, you start small, you grow big. You are founded on old technology, and why are you going to change it? Because if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of approach. But he said when we got into that in the shutdown, he basically said that dealing with this really, you had to kind of self-manage, that you're on your own. Yes, the insurer is going to bring in an incident response firm, and the law enforcement gets involved, and yes, they may have a broker. Like the insurer will say, "Look, we're going to go negotiate with the ransomware group or whoever it is." I guess their idea is that somehow they're going to talk them down, or there'll be a lesser payment. But at the end of the day, they're still kind of holding him accountable. But I think one of the big points he made is it is timely. It doesn't happen quickly. You get shut down over the weekend, you come in Monday or Sunday, you figure it out. It's not like even if you were just to pay the ransom, immediately say, hey, I've got the luxury of, I've got $5 million burning a hole in my pocket. Let's pay you now and figure out how to convert that into cryptocurrency and get it transferred to you. The reality is it is still going to take days, weeks, if not months or more to get up and running. Like I said, that company still not up and running. And they actually sold to a larger firm. And they lost about 50-60 million on enterprise value during due diligence because this came up, right? That they knew about this, and that led to additional expenses, deeper dive, more due diligence, deeper dives, all that kind of stuff that had to occur. But the one thing I'd say, if I could take away the lesson from him, was he basically said you can't negotiate from emotion. You have to just look at it like it's any other business issue. Every time I see the FBI or somebody says, "Yeah, we took down this group," or "We took down their share site," right? Whatever it is, another one is going to pop up tomorrow. And like, just read SentinelOne's threat reports, read Verizon's. Tabletops, I think, are the most valuable tool that we have, right? Because it puts everybody around the table. They face a real world, simulation of an incident that it could occur. And what it really helps them realize is that a lot of the decisions aren't technical decisions. There may be a technical act or task that is to be completed, but it will have the business impact. Back to my CEO who decided, the heck with it, I'm going to build a whole new operation. And while I do that, I'm willing to pay the ransom because that's the fastest way to get the old system up and running, right? That's not an IT call. That's the CEO, the CFO, and the board.
This is 118
Why
proof.
would anybody do this?
Fall apart at the most tender.
It tastes like I just got pepper sprayed by a cop. No more questions. Are we done?